Thank you very much for those very kind words. It is wonderful to be here, and I want to thank you all for coming as well to share in what's actually a very exciting occasion for global health in Brighton and Sussex Medical School. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we've been doing, about 10 minutes or so, what we're doing at the moment, what the centre's going to be doing, who's involved. Then, as Julian's already said, we're delighted that Jimmy and Chris have come as well to give their perspectives on our theme really for the event, which is investing in global health research. Okay, so people who live in low-income settings disproportionately bear the burden of disease and premature death. And normally when we look at a map of the world, the size of the country is proportional to the geographical piece of land. But World Mapper redraws these maps where the size of the country is represented in a proportional way to a particular parameter. So here we see countries according to their population, so large populations in India and in China. But down here, just representing disease burden more generally, I've just picked under 5 mortality as an example. And what you can see here is that the countries of sub-Saharan Africa and Asia suddenly become huge. Because, for example, of the 6.6 million deaths in children under the age of 5 in 2012, the vast majority occurred in these low-income settings. And you can see Europe and North America have kind of disappeared because it's so unusual. Now, if we look at the burden of disease, again represented arbitrarily by under 5 mortality, and then we look at research activity around the world, looking particularly at scientific growth, so output of scientific publications, and investment in research and development, we see the opposite story. So the countries that have the highest burden of disease have the least research activity. Africa has pretty much disappeared. And then the countries where there's less disease have got these much larger proportionate investment and research outputs. So there's clearly a gap that we know about already. And as research develops globally and the low-income countries are being left behind, this gap is actually just widening. I'm going to focus on the genetic side because firstly it's a very rapidly advancing field in terms of the science, and it's also something that we have a particular interest in here. And so there have been these amazing advances in scientific genomics and genetics that will undoubtedly lead to major improvements for human health, things like the sequence of the human genome, advances in technology and in the tools to analyze the data. And so already many genes have been identified for a number of diseases. And this map just, because of the technology, we can do these large-scale studies now. And this map is just an update at the end of 2012 of genes that have been identified and found to be associated with diseases. So these are the chromosomes that contain all the genes. And each dot represents a study where there's been an association between a particular gene and a particular disease. And the color coding just represents different classes of diseases. And as you can see, there are hundreds and hundreds of genes that are now being discovered. However, the vast majority of these studies have been done in high-income countries. So if we have all this data in high-income countries, why can't we just use that, extrapolate those findings to low-income countries, and that might save a lot of money, which some people would argue should be invested in improving vaccination programs and sanitation if we really want to save lives. But I would argue that's not the way forward. For example, if you just look at the epidemiology of diseases, they're very different in high and low-income countries. So, for example, with communicable diseases, particularly malaria and tuberculosis, then we find that those are high burden in the low-income countries, but very little disease and therefore very little research, and there are actually no data to extrapolate to different situations. And then on the other hand, even for diseases, for example, non-communicable diseases which are on the increase in the low-income setting, things like diabetes, hypertension, although they have a much wider global distribution, due to differences in populations, you cannot extrapolate from one population to another. For example, various biological and cultural differences will come into play. And just to illustrate this, I just want to show you this slide here. This is Africa, and all the dots represent genetic diversity. So you'll see that there's a huge amount of genetic diversity in Africa reflected in the large number of dots and the different colors. And modern humans evolved out of Africa and then went on to populate the rest of the world. But you can see the lack of diversity, if you like, in these other populations. So just a subset of the groups moved, and it's not representative of the rest of Africa. And yet the high-income countries where the tools that we use for these genetic studies have been developed are all low diversity compared to African populations. So when we use these tools, like all these gene chips and the technology and so on, and apply them to African populations, they don't work. Because as you can see, the difference, not only is there the lack of diversity here, this is all blue and yellow, and this is all different colours. So there isn't the blue and yellow represented in the African populations to make these tools useful. So I'm just going to say a bit about what's been going on at BSMS over the last 10 years in the Global Health Programme. Having started, as already been mentioned, global health's been on the agenda for some time here. We've developed research interests and projects in a variety of different areas, and we've developed a master's in global health. And over the years, we've also developed a number of relationships and collaborations with overseas institutions, and a number of these are in sub-Saharan African countries. And we've also got a PhD program running now with a number of people who have actually graduated with their PhDs. So when the call for the Wellcome Trust Centres came out for global health research, it seemed like a wonderful opportunity for us to try and consolidate what we'd already done in global health so far and build on these foundations, and also try to link up some of our partners as well into a sort of a bigger effort. So the main aim of the centre is to actually build capacity for independent research at 3 of our partner institutions that then empowers scientists in those countries to contribute to the wider African research endeavours. And we've really sort of chosen 2 routes that we will be going down. So firstly is to identify and then to develop and support and mentor bright individual researchers who have the potential to become future leaders and have their own groups, and most importantly be able to generate their own research income. And so our aim is to support those individuals. And then we also want to be developing research skills for the sort of wider academic communities within our partner institutions, so through running workshops and courses and so on. So we'll be working very closely with our partners to identify what the needs are and how to take this forward. And we're going to focus on genetics and genomics predominantly in health and disease. I've already explained that there is this big gap in knowledge anyway in the countries where we're working. And also it's something that we have some experience and expertise and interest in here. But we're not focused just on gene discoveries and contributing to that other map. We want to look at a much more holistic picture, because as well as the biomedical side of things in gene discovery, doing genetics involves all sorts of, you have to take into consideration ethical and cultural and social implications, policy and economics. And those areas also need research as well. So we've got a very kind of holistic approach and very multidisciplinary. So what we've actually got for the centre is the representation of these different disciplines. So our 3 centres are in Ethiopia, Cameroon and Sudan. And Muntessa is here, and it's wonderful that you came over. And then in the UK, we've got those of us working at the medical school here. So I'm particularly grateful to Gail Davey and Bobby Farsidis for the input into the whole global health programme, and we wouldn't be here without that input. And then Stefan, who's the director of the Centre for Global Health Policy at the University of Sussex, is part of our group, and also Bella Starling, who has also made it down from Manchester today, so welcome. And Bella works at NowGen, which is a centre of excellence for public engagement and education. And then represented in our collaborators, we have a wide range of other expertise and experience throughout the departments of our home universities and wider afield. And the idea is to have exchange flow, individuals, tutors, knowledge and expertise. And I'm particularly keen to emphasise this outer circle. So it's not just sort of UK-Africa links. What we're going to do with this centre is develop better links between the centres within the Africa region. And this is just to show how it fits in more generally. These are the 3 centres that we'll be working together with. The Wellcome Trust is actually supporting a number of other centres within the African continent. And so we have some good links already with some of these. And you can see we could actually imagine some sort of continent-wide research network developing as a result of these centres. And that's a sort of a more long-term goal, if you like. So finally, that's a brief overview of what's going on here, what the centre's about and what we hope to do. Obviously, we'd like to thank very much the Wellcome Trust for giving us this opportunity and for supporting us, and also for their support over the last 10 years, because a lot of the research that has been done over the last 10 years has been sponsored by them, and we wouldn't be in the position to be getting a successful bid without that. The medical school here has also been incredibly supportive, both matching the funding and also through having global health as such a prominent feature on the agenda. Particularly John Cohen, who's just left as Dean, and Kevin Davis, who is the head of our division, have been very supportive in all our efforts in global health. And obviously the wider community in the universities, we've got a wonderful global health group meeting now, meeting regularly, who will all have input into this centre, I'm sure. And finally, we've been sponsored by other organisations for the research we've done. And just one last word of thanks, and that's to Jane Wellington and to Tracy O'Gorman, who've really helped me with the organisation, and to Gordon Kay and Nathaniel Stratton, who've also helped with the promotion of this event this evening. I couldn't have managed it without them. Thanks very much.